I came to this epiphany that it had built something that I didn't want at all.
Talk about a real world experience there.
It was like super complicated, and it just went in like a completely different direction than I had wanted it to go. And I was like, what's wrong with me? Like, why did I let it take over my brain? Like, why did I let this happen? And then, so I spent the rest of the walk figuring out exactly what it was that I actually had wanted, formulating that in my mind. And then I got back to my computer and told it a thing or two. Hey, Meg.
Hey, Amy.
And hi, everyone. Well, today was supposed to be a guest episode. We were supposed to have Ankur Bhatt, the amazing AI engineering leader, join us today, but he had to cancel due to illness. So we really hope that he heals quickly, and we're excited to have him back.
Yeah. He's been doing some really interesting stuff, and as usual, is someone that I look to try to understand things. So I'm definitely looking forward to having a chat with him, and it will be worth it whenever we can get him here.
Yeah,
And when
and
he's healthy.
he had a recent piece that was going to be kind of the center point of our episode, which will pop up here because you all should read it before we do have him back and actually talk about it in depth. But it certainly did get us thinking about all sorts of things. And because it had been a while since we'd actually done a solo episode, we thought this was a good opportunity for us to share some of the things that have been coming up in our lives in the last couple weeks and what we've been focused on. Before we get into some of those deeper things, we had a fun adventure last week. You want to tell everyone about that?
A bit of a Meg and Amy show field trip, if you will. We were fortunate to go visit our friends Heather Bussing and John Sumser in the North Bay. John happens to be an amazing cook. I hadn't really read that in his bio, but they invited us for lunch, and then we did a bit of a photo shoot. And if you are following the Meg and Amy show on Instagram, you might have seen that their dog Carlos and Mr. Bean happened to be a mini me and bigger me.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, they happen to be twins. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, super cute. And they got along pretty well.
Yeah. They were fine. They were fine. But yeah, what a cute situation that they both almost look like they're related, except for one is quite small.
Let's talk about what's been going on. So what Ankur had been writing about was, what does it actually take to deploy AI agents in production? Who owns the outcome when things go wrong? What is the human's role when agents are doing the work? And we went pretty deep on these topics. And Meg, you've done some reading in the AI area over the last week. And I think you all know from a few episodes ago that I've been vibe coding, and I got really obsessed with it. And I now have, I don't know, hundreds of hours of vibe coding under my belt. And I want to talk more about that. Do you mind?
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about it too because it's super interesting to watch behind the scenes. So I've always known you, Amy, to care deeply about the things that you build and the teams that you build them with. So this was a really interesting parallel to watch as you were not only really refining your idea, but also getting used to the velocity of AI. So that was really, really fun to watch from the sidelines. And probably we should talk a little bit about the cognitive and emotional side of that as well.
So this week, Ethan Mollick posted something that you responded, and it might be like the best 2-sentence summary I've ever heard lately. Anyway, his observation was that forward deployed AI engineers are not going to deliver what companies are hoping for. AI transformation is far less a technical issue and much more about rethinking the deep expertise and structure of your organization. You reposted it and said, that's the rub. The complexity is in the workflow design, not the tools per se. So tell us more about what you're thinking here, Meg.
Yeah. So the more I think about our conversation where we were discussing the idea that having, context and business understanding is so important to driving real transformation, the more I realize that the conversation is just a little off. People are looking for AI for quick fixes or high output, or they're looking for it for cost reduction in some form or fashion. And all of that is great, but to me that's a middle state, and they're really struggling, I think, with the more structural pieces that are going to make the biggest difference for business. And so, as we talked about, I really believe 2026 is the year we move from things that we could do with AI to being purposeful and real about making AI make a difference. I really think we need to bring forward much more focus to what is the result we're trying to get, and then pull the thread towards the tools and the techniques. And so I think that this is going to be a real level cutter between people that are experimenting and people that are really getting outsized value from their AI.
Yeah, and I think a really good example, just to kind of put things into like a bit of a practical frame, is thinking about customer onboarding, right? So, customer onboarding is something that matters to every company. And making sure that you bring on your customers quickly, that they're happy, that there's time to value, that they have a perceived sense of ROI as quickly as possible. Like those are really important things. But when you think about the process around customer onboarding, there's very few people who would really know like what all is happening, and maybe no one, right? Like, so the people on the ground, they have their own narrow view of what the process is, of what the key steps are. And then you have, people kind of higher up that know we want it to be faster, we want it to be better, right? But to apply kind of a make it better and faster lens, and to just ask the people on the ground to, use AI to make it faster and better, they're going to, maybe automate a step here, maybe automate a step there. But that really isn't going to make much of a difference. Like, so maybe there'll be a little bit of efficiency. Maybe you can save some costs. Maybe you can improve the onboarding process from 2 weeks to 10 days or something like that. But you're really leaving a lot of opportunity on the table, right? Because you could instead be thinking, okay, our big goal is to dramatically reduce the time to value. What are the bottlenecks that we're encountering right now? What are the things that are preventing that from happening? And then also, like, what are the constraints that no longer exist, right? Because you suddenly have some of these AI tools. And if you can then bring together people who have some domain expertise. So maybe you need a couple people that, are on the ground, but that have that ability to see the bigger picture and have that AI fluency. So that trio of three skills that we've talked about before, then suddenly you can really think about reinventing and reimagining the workflow. And that's a whole different ballgame than just, surgically automating for efficiency. Does that kind of fit what you're thinking, Meg?
Exactly. And I think that the opportunity for value creation is significantly higher in the systems thinking that you're talking about than in just incrementally making something more efficient or optimizing an existing process. I want to pull the thread about the physical experience of work and the physical manifestation of these processes. And I think oftentimes right now, a lot of the conversation is very sort of digital and abstract. We're thinking about context, but we're thinking about it based on all the pieces that we see in the digital workflow. And we're thinking about it in all of the pieces that are systems oriented. And we're not really thinking about it in that bigger picture of where are the humans and where is the physical reality and how do those pieces also have a big impact on how we could reimagine or rethink what the constraints are and why the constraints are there. And so I think we're going to back into some of these things, right? We're letting go of a lot of people and we're going to figure out, oh, wow, they were doing things we didn't know. And we're zooming ahead with a whole lot of automation and trying to reimagine things. But I feel like could be a much sort of smarter and more efficient way to do this by really trying to understand the work better, trying to truly understand what is happening and why is it happening, and then what are the big opportunities and where is the need. And I just feel that this is going to be the bottleneck, people that can help us think in that more holistic way.
Just kind of pulling that customer onboarding thread. So let's say like a lot of the digital constraints of getting customers onboarded and happy have gone away. So maybe we need to focus more on the human contact, the people that had to do, all of the paperwork and all of the digital stuff and everything that goes away. But the people that are there, to really make the customer like feel good and be connected to other customers and to feel that they're not just a customer, but they're a partner, that they're participating in the future of the product or what have you. That is really important. And maybe, that's a forward deploy engineer, but probably not. Like that, that doesn't sound like the right title because it's almost like somebody who's more caregiving and connecting and maybe it's some new variation of a forward deploy engineer or something that we need to be thinking about to make the most of the opportunity that we have.
Yeah, and I also think that in that future that you're imagining in that conversation, we have more in the tooling that can help us personalize what we understand about the customer. So way back when, we've been talking about wanting this customer 360 and to truly understand what are all the things they've bought, what are all the challenges they've had, all of these sorts of things. These have been ideas in the CRM domain forever. But the truth is they've really struggled because their ability to then tailor what conversation you had with the customer and also what you offered them was very constrained to playbooks. But in this world, we're not constrained by having to have universal playbooks. Instead, we can have understood intent and we could then individualize the things that we did with each customer to better serve them and to help them feel special, appreciated part of the solution. So when you think about what would it mean to be that connection with the customer for onboarding and ongoing relationship building, you can imagine that that role is going to change dramatically and has the opportunity to be both a lot more fulfilling and a lot more fruitful because it is that first line relationship that builds all of your upsell and all of your durability of revenue, et cetera, et cetera. And if you had those better connections with the customer, you would probably understand not just how to serve them in this current context, but then to be able to think about where are new value opportunities that you could open up as well. So there's just a whole lot when we talk about like new jobs created. I think this is the piece, but we're only going to discover this piece when we start looking at the opportunity with a new set of eyes versus just trying to build our existing workflows with AI built in.
Yeah, yeah. So another thing I know that's been top of mind for you is it a new book, Reset? Is it newly out?
I don't know that it's newly out. I tend to get a lot of recommendations and then just start queuing them up. So I did just finish a book and just started Reset, and this is Dan Heath's book, and I've been a long time fan of Chip and Dan Heath's work because they often are talking about not only change, but how to think about systems and people and all of those sorts of
Are
things.
they
So
back of the napkin? Is that right? Is that one?
no, no,
No.
no.
Oh,
Switch and is one, and Made to Stick is
made
another.
stick. That's what I was thinking.
Yes. And so I'm just getting started in this, but it's pointing out a bunch of really good examples that are well outside of just technology, but very much in the path of how do we get stuck in systems that were built for a different time or a different set of constraints and then become overwhelming to us, and how is it hard, why and how is it hard to take a step back and reimagine how they should be, and what are the value opportunities when you can do that. And what's nice about his writing in particular is that it's almost always done with a very sort of use case example forward point of view. And so some of the examples are just so rich in texture about the fact that it's these systems and humans that are the part we're missing, and most of it is because those of us that think it's our job to reimagine the future haven't had our hands dirty doing the work in a very long time, and that is just such a disaster. If you do not go and follow and get access to the people doing the work, you're very likely to come up with great ideas that are not necessarily going to be the ones that are either adopted or solve the problem in the first place.
Yeah. You had mentioned to me that there are kind of like 3 human failures that you that kind of popped out to you from reading the book as well as, Ethan's bit, and one was that we talked about already, and that was automating the wrong things, but there were 2 others. One was, trying to do everything, so trying to do too many things with AI. And then the third was not accounting for what you've already built, not recognizing the kind of the maintenance toll and load that you will have going forward. Do you wanna
Yeah.
talk a little bit about those?
Yeah. So I think, again, this kind of gets back to my thesis that the people and the companies that are successful with their AI initiatives are going to be the ones that pick some big bets as opposed to try to do a bunch of different things. I think this for 2 reasons. I think change fatigue is real, and I think absorption and transformation takes a lot of work. But I also think that it is going to really start to, like, there's a tipping point, diminishing returns, if you will, if you start trying to do every possible low-hanging fruit thing with AI, you're going to actually build a lot of resistance to the entire transformation journey. Because one of the things that came out in the book and that is a great reminder is that for transformation to work well, people have to feel and see progress for themselves. It's not just enough or good enough to have it be something that's sort of abstract or outside of their purview. They have to feel the benefit and they have to feel the progress. That is a really important thing for us as humans to have value and meaning in our work. And so
And sorry to interject, but and that was something that Ankur really honed in on in his piece, right? In terms of so for the tax notice, AI capability, getting the tax ops people to trust it. There was training wouldn't help, guidebooks wouldn't help, transformation program management wouldn't work. They had to see it in action and, be triple checking that it was what they expected and then could start to let it do certain things on its own, right?
yeah, it's just really motivating for us to feel that progress is happening and to understand how our work is impacting that progress. And when we strip that away, we lose the momentum that can be built. And what's super interesting that he brought up in the book was that most managers when they were asked of a list of like, what are the things they think will help people feel most engaged, they never mentioned progress, making progress. But for individuals, when they asked them, it was absolutely at the top of the list. And unsurprising, a lot of times we're like, oh, we'll motivate with money, we'll motivate with awards, we'll motivate with this or that. Like, no, I want to feel like the hard work that I'm doing is worth doing and that I'm getting better at it and I'm making progress at it. And so when I think about like what we want, we need to get faster and more agility. To build that kind of agility, we really need to think very carefully about which things we go after and make sure we're building the right kind of transformational muscle inclusive of how do we show the progress that we're getting and how do we help individuals that are doing the work feel that progress for themselves. So,
Can I talk about my vibe coding now?
yes, let's talk about your vibe coding because I think that's just a new example of where we can start to think about things in ways we couldn't before. So tell us about where you are and what your journey has been like over the last few weeks.
Yeah. So when we last got together here, and I shared that I had been building an app for my mom. It's exploded, and now it's great. But
Scope creep.
but there's been a lot of learning that I'm really excited to share with folks. So first, I think like it's really good to juxtapose where I'm at now versus where I was before. And I did talk about how I used Claude Code last fall to work on a prototype. And it wasn't just the tools that were not as good, like the lack of memory and the ability to keep working. It wasn't just the lack of tooling capability at the time. It was also my lack of capability at the time. There was a point when I was using Claude Code and it was prototyping this whole kind of like transformation app idea that I had. And at a certain point, Claude just kind of ran with it and just like started like building with my very light specs, just started building stuff. And I went on a walk on the beach and I came to this epiphany that it had built something that I didn't want at all.
Talk about a real world experience right
Yeah.
there.
Like, it was, like, super complicated, and it just went in, like, a completely different direction than I had wanted it to go, and I was like, "What's wrong with me? Like, why did I let it, like, take over my brain? Like, why did I let this happen?" And then so I spent the rest of the walk, like, figuring out exactly what it was that I actually had wanted, formulating that in my mind, and then I got back to my computer and told it a thing or two, right? And it
And
was
did you try to course correct or did you just do a start over?
somewhere in between, I guess, because again, like at the time, like every single thing I did had to be kind of done in isolation because it didn't have the broader memory and it would crash after if it did too much. So I had to do like these smaller pieces and then ultimately fit them together with a Figma wrapper. So I don't know exactly, but I probably kind of started over with that particular piece and those pieces. So now it's a completely different world because the tooling is better, but I have a much better framework, mindset, etc. to make sure that doesn't happen. I also think that Claude Cowork manages this a lot better. Like I really Claude Code, I would tell it something and then it would just go, right? And with a Claude Cowork, most of the time there's like a thought partnership opportunity where we're kind of like, it asks me questions, further questions, and there's some exploration. And And then the other thing that's nice is that if I decide that, oh, it started too soon, I can just stop it now and it doesn't just like crash. And I have to start all over. Like I'm able to stop it and say, hey, wait a second. Before you proceed, I'd really like to see 3 visual layouts, and see which one I like first before you keep going, or, let's think through this a little bit more. So that's pretty cool. So I would say that for me was a huge unlock.
Really quick question on that. For people that are just starting, et cetera, now I understand like moving in time has been beneficial because the tools have gotten better, and moving to the co-work has been beneficial because it's built for that more interactivity. But for new people, it feels to me like part of their learning journey really did just benefit from a kind of a first try crash and burn experience to kind of get oriented about how it works differently than you might have imagined. Do you think that that's true? Because I kind of suspect that most people would benefit from just giving it a go, but knowing that your first project is probably a throwaway project, and then your learnings from that could be beneficial to you.
Yeah, and I mean, and the great thing is a throwaway project can be redone, in literal minutes. But I definitely would recommend, trying something that's just fun, right? Rather than like trying to, create a whole new recruiting or payroll app or something.
So
Crazy.
so your recommendation is not to go first trying to vibe code a commercial SaaS app, even though that seems to be the narrative in the space.
One of the other revelations that I've had, and kind of like connecting the dots between the leadership corner we did a couple weeks back, and then some other things we've been reading and writing, is that I very much see myself as an executive in this space, right? So
Just to rewind for people, so what you're talking about is the conversation we had about the fact that managing AI agents is a management job. And so now you're saying that your perception or your clarity is that your role is still an executive against these agents. Okay, so
yeah.
tell me more. What do you
Yeah,
mean
and
when you
so
say
I
that?
feel like I have a little bit of an advantage maybe, and maybe I can provide a little bit of clarity and help for people in terms of what that means. But in my executive job as a product leader, I did a lot of like vision, right? Of like, and what I would call intent. Like this is
And those
what.
are just that are listening are missing the massively awesome jazz hands that are going with this statement. So I'm just making sure that that's not lost.
Let's do this,
Yeah.
and I want it to work like this, and wouldn't it be cool if we did that? You know what I mean? Like I wasn't writing, user stories and like getting into like all the super details. I was really setting the intention of what it was that we were going to build. And so what this like vibe coding is very similar to that, right? So it fits my kind of skill set and my background, I or
And your
really
strengths.
my
Yeah.
strengths really well, where I can, kind of paint a picture and and then have the development team, come back to me with detailed questions and prepare an implementation plan and then go execute it, and then I can go in and look and be like, I don't really like that, or this isn't quite what I meant, maybe a little bit different. But there's nothing like so completely off, right? That I can't correct it a little bit as a result. I want to double down on what we've shared before, that you really do need to start building up those skills um, of what what are the executive skills people need to
Outside
build?
of meetings, you mean?
I don't know. Like, I mean, just in terms of being
Right.
able to up level in terms of being able to have like a broader view of being able to apply judgment to, what to focus on and what not to focus on. Like all of those capabilities are really important in terms of working with AI going forward.
I'm observing something very similar in the people that I'm watching on Twitter and even the conversation with Ankur that um, it's often the CTOs that I are finding themselves in a similar way of being really hands-on and really productive because they've already built up exactly what you're talking about, those executive skills of both big picture, clarity about generally what could go wrong and what could go right, and enough understanding of where some of those pitfalls are to know when to be more clear versus when to just leave it open for interpretation, et cetera. So I do think whether your skill is on the product side or on the technology side, leaning into some of those strengths while getting hands-on yourself is actually super powerful. I think the trick will be, and this I think is what you're alluding to, is to try to understand how do we build some of that bigger picture strength into not only the junior developers, but actually the mid-level people. Because I was at the Operator Collective just recently did a really nice event about AI, and it was all talking about where people really were and what they were doing, which was really nice to be part of. But one of the things that just kept coming up over and over again is this concern that it's actually the people in the middle that are most vulnerable. Early talent is picking things up pretty quickly, and you expect to give them additional guidance anyway, so there's a lot of, kind of mental model for that. Senior talent is, getting oriented pretty quickly and finding a whole lot of value. Mid-level talent can struggle a lot because your existing expertise might be less applicable, but you might not have built up the skill of the kind of task delegation and the kind of oversight that you need to do to manage other people's work at this kind of
And you're
velocity.
also likely the most squeezed in terms of time. So you have the least amount of time to be able to dedicate to this. I was just talking to a mid-level executive, and she was saying everything is dependent on her being able to figure out AI stuff, but she has no time to do it. And it's just like this double bind. So being able to make that time is going to be so important. And there needs to be some structural ways to do that. Not it can't just be a burden on individuals. There has to be some sort of structural ability to do it.
Because it's really, really, really important, I think, this whole idea of having time. I commented on someone's LinkedIn recently, and it's gotten quite a bit of energy about it. And it was the person was a CMO and talking about not having time to get their hands dirty themselves on AI, et cetera, and then eventually kind of having to have a talk with themselves and say, quit being a baby and get in there and do it. I really want to remind everyone that oftentimes when we struggle to prioritize something or we find ourselves procrastinating, it's a nervous system issue, not just a time issue. And so oftentimes I think it's really hard to remind yourself that your procrastination is trying to tell you something. And so I'm not suggesting that it isn't truly a time issue, but it is also a prioritization issue. And so while from a systems point of view, from an organizational point of view, absolutely finding ways to make that onboarding process and the on-ramp process easier and to pair people up so they don't feel so alone in their learning journey, I think is super important. But for each of us individually, I think it's also comes down to telling people you're out for the day and spending the day getting, up to speed on some of the basics and getting your environment set up is really, really important and non-negotiable. And I get it. I do it myself. I push things aside that I know take a different kind of energy or a different type of mindset or something that doesn't compete with other priorities in my life. But at the same time, if you're struggling to get started or if you're telling yourself you don't have time, ask yourself the next couple questions underneath that, which is this a problem that you're ready to solve yet? Or is this a nervous system issue that you need to figure out how to make it more safe for yourself?
Yeah, I feel like I'm living my own version of that with the vibe coding right now because I have been procrastinating getting my memory instructions sorted because I'm so obsessed with giving my development team work to do. And I am so addicted to seeing what they do come to life. Like, I just can't, so I have not been able to just like stop and like go and take time to work on my memory instructions. And that means that I have to keep repeating myself. Like I have to keep saying, put the sequel in a code block so that I can copy it to Supabase. You know this. I keep saying this, but it does not remember because it keeps compacting my conversations. And I have to keep saying, please give me visual, things in this. Yeah, anyway, so I promise I will take time tomorrow to work
You
on
know,
my memory
so
instruction.
since I have a few of these I've queued up for myself, I'll share a couple tips that I do for myself when I'm in this state. I schedule on my calendar a block when I'm gonna do something, and I put it far enough away, so maybe into next week or something, to give myself a little peace so that I quit beating myself up about it, number 1. Number 2, once I've created that moment where I'm gonna do it, I start collecting all of the notes to myself that I'm trying to remember to do in a block of time, and whether you do that in Notion or you do that in Notepad or wherever, who cares? Or even just in the calendar invite itself. And I, of course, because I am who I am, I collect all kinds of links of all of these people have these great suggestions of how you should organize memory and how you should build default instructions. And I have just this laundry list of things that I need to read with more intention and then decide which pieces of it I want to copy and which pieces I want to ignore, etc. But I put all of that in one place. So then when I am ready to get started, I've removed some of the on-ramping problem for myself, and I am in a better position to say, "All right, I have my hour or 2 hours or 15 minutes or whatever, and I have my list of references all in a single place, and therefore I can sit down and actually take on this task." But I try to separate it the same way like when you try to get yourself to go to the gym, you put your shoes by the front door and your workout bag by the front door or whatever. It's the same thing. Build some things that take that easy.
I will put on my workout clothes first thing and sit in them for, the duration of my tea drinking and my
That's right.
vibe coding morning session.
Some people meditate, Amy vibe code now. Maybe we should talk about the one other thing that I was watching. So, Jason Lemkin commented, I think it was last week, on something that really stuck with me. And he was basically commenting on the pressure that his agents were giving him now, because what he really was talking about was that he had become the weak link in the chain, where before he was the super orchestrator, whatever, at the top. But what he's starting to learn is now when you have a whole bunch of agents and those agents never sleep and they keep coming back to you with their questions or wanting to bring forward things that they've done or whatever, you are way slower than them. And it's actually a little bit of an emotional burden to have this much pressure on yourself. So it sounds like you're feeling that a little bit as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and when you brought this to me originally, the word pressure didn't sound right because it made it sound like Claude was pinging you and being like, "Hey, give me more," like that there was like actual pressure. But that's not really the case. There it's not like the bot is actually pressuring me, but just the fact that it's sitting there, with availability. Like when we were managing the investment and the work of development teams, if they were sitting idle, like that would be the worst possible thing you could do. Like that you're wasting the company's money, you're pissing off a bunch of capable people, like how could you and that could be because you didn't make a decision quick enough, or you what other reasons?
You just didn't understand the problem enough, and so you needed to take the time to comprehend it to be able to give feedback or to even unblock someone with
Yeah.
approval, to your
Right,
point about.
right. So, yeah, and so, like, that's, like, the worst thing you could do as a product manager or as an executive or what have you. But it didn't happen that often because there were there was lots of work to do. There was a huge, pent up demand, right? Like, there was always more demand from me and from product managers. So, it was very rare that you'd be in a situation where developers had idle hands. But now those developers have idle hands, and it's crap.
Yeah.
I gotta get in there.
On the weak
It
link,
wakes me up
yeah.
in the middle of the night,
Oh,
and I
man.
come up with my list of things to to do.
And that's with the new creation innovation. You can imagine when these agents are doing tasks within your existing business flow, which is I think what Jason's agents are doing. You could definitely be like, "Oh, the weak link not closing a deal. I'm the weak link not, creating a marketing campaign or activating these other things that are critical to my business."
I just have the one team that I'm working with right.
And they're working on one program,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
we can imagine a world where lots of us are managing lots of programs, which is, again, what executive work really is. But it does tip, I think, the relationship balance. And, most of us got to our leadership positions being pretty darn good at what we do, right? And so to recognize that you're actually the worst worker with the worst work ethic of the entire team is probably gonna be a little tough.
So speaking of procrastination,
Yay. Yeah, I knew you were gonna come back at me on that one.
I feel like there's something big that you're wrestling with as well, Meg, that I think is really important to share with our community. What
Yeah.
is what are we gonna do with Meg's brain in the world of AI?
Yeah, so do you wanna start and explain the,
Yeah.
Nate's
Okay.
bit? Yeah.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So we've mentioned Nate B. Jones many times on this show, and we will continue to
We're
do so
fangirls
because,
until he decides to join us and, come
yeah.
talk to us, yeah.
Have you asked him yet?
No. That was it.
Right, you gotta do the Travis Kelce, just put it out into the universe,
That's
sort
right.
of thing.
That's
Yeah.
right.
He's our Taylor Swift, but he puts out a new video every day, and I swear to God, every single video he puts out, I'm just like, "Wow, that's fantastic." It's either something that blew my mind that I had no idea about, or he just articulates something that we've been thinking about in just a fantastic way, much better than I could have done so, and it's just rich, really, really rich. So he came out with this thing that he was calling open brain, and the whole premise is that though the memory is getting better in these models, they're all contained within a model. And they're, purposefully putting up walled gardens around those memory because they want to lock you in to using their model because that's good business. But the reality is that because of the power of AI, we actually don't have to live by those rules. And in fact, we can create like portable memory across all sorts of different AI models, that exist today as well as into the future. And he calls this concept open brain. And he has like a whole step by step process in which you can, that you can follow to set this up, and basically you can point your AI model to your open brain, or in Meg's case, her Meg brain,
Mhm.
and and, forevermore live in, this perfect world. So I heard this, and instead of thinking, oh, this is something I need to do, because of course I've been putting off my even basic memory work. So God forbid I actually do this. I was thinking, wow, this would be really good for Meg to do. It sounds very, very in her wheelhouse. And she said, absolutely, I will do that next month.
Yeah, so this actually gets to the, there's a lot of people that try different organization systems, and I tend to love the beginning of the year when people talk about like, "Oh, well, this is the year I have the perfect notebook, and it'll be the perfect, organization structure for me." I've always been a little bit more mad scientist about my organization structure, and I'm positive I get this from my father, whose filing systems really legendary might be the right word.
No, I think we're
Or
gonna have to get a picture of that up here.
uh, yeah, at some point. I've definitely tried several things. I fall into the trap is, as you know, I read all the things. I send things to people when I think that these are related to topics they're interested in or that make me think about them. This works really well for me. I have a great sort of taxonomy of different people I know who are interested in different types of topics or talk about different types of topics, and so sharing things that I read. But then 2 weeks later, I'll read something that's sort of related, and I'll think back to the other thing, and then I cannot remember where I put that other thing because I might not have even written it down. And so over this last well, actually, since I started, going independent and doing having more time for reading, I've tried, like, several different things, and they've all been disasters. I tried to do something in just notes, and I did find that eventually notes, when it blows out of capacity, it just just gives up and not only crashes the notes app, but it literally loses all your notes, which is kind of the opposite of trying to write things down. And so then I started trying to do I got a subscription to Notion, I got a subscription to Granola. I've tried to play around with some of those sorts of tools for logging. I've done several different types of reading logging types apps and categorization and all of that. So long way to say this is a really good idea for Meg because I understand exactly the problem this open brain is trying to solve, which is instead of trying to make sense of it or organize it, lean on AI to be good at finding things again for you and just build in automation so that you can kind of log from anywhere and then search for it in a more AI centric kind of way. That is a fantastic idea for me. That is going to have to take multiple rounds of iteration because even I am not completely clear where all my sources are in the world. It's just at the end of the day, they all sort of enrich my mental model. But there is a real frustration for me where then I have to try to rewind to come back to, well, I'm actually associating this with this other idea that I read. Was it a month ago? Was it 2 months ago? Did I share it on LinkedIn? Did I put it in a newsletter? Did I just text it to Amy? It's really a hot mess underneath the covers. And so I love the idea. It is also embedded in getting better structure on what I already have with my AI tooling. So I built my AI tooling pretty early, maybe, and like everything, it would benefit from a rethink now that you can do a lot more with it. And I want to go ahead and shift over and start using Claude more. So I have a whole migration of things from OpenAI over into Claude. So all of that gives enough of a value proposition to start connecting all of these things, putting it into a database. It's so interesting to me. Obviously, my entire heritage has been database driven operational transaction systems of record. And so that part comes very naturally to me. So I think it's really fascinating when people are starting to realize that data stores still have a really important place. Visualizations on top of data stores have a really important place where you can both see things and manipulate the data, but also having multiple entry into those and then being able to ingest it and use it for more active tooling. So I think that'll be like the place where I will find more value in vibe coding is the tooling side of it. And then the question comes, would I share that brain with someone else? I think I might. And, make it searchable for someone else about like against a certain set of topics. Like if you were interested in space plus neuroscience, what would you find? And you would find that Make reads on those things sometimes. So, yeah, I think it'd be interesting. But yeah, it's gonna take time.
Can't wait. Yeah, I making me a little nauseous just thinking of what you need to do to give yourself the leg up to keep you from procrastinating. So,
Yeah, so just to make you feel a little better on this, I haven't set the time in the calendar yet, but I have started collecting all of the notes and hints about things that have to do with setting up Claude, with migrating existing automations that I have in OpenAI to Claude. I've documented those. I've got those in a place that could be ingested. Building all of the hooks, playing with your app is teaching me some of the ways that I like to hook things up, and then getting a better automation of all of our transcripts and getting those to be able to be ingested would also be really handy. I've at least got all of our season 1 in one place where I would want to upload it, and then I need to build something that does it automatically for me. So I have a lot of little tools to build on top of this big idea tool as well, but yeah, we'll see. I'll be calling soon to get all the advice on how to keep the agents in line.
well, I think we're having a lot of fun, which we expected would be happening when we kicked off the season. Lots of uh lots of fun to be had.
Well, and I also think there's some really good learning, not just learning in the actual skills, but also a little bit in the metacognition around how to think about these things and what they mean for us on a human level, but also on sort of the day-to-day work. I think it's really helpful to get your hands dirty no matter what to make something concrete so that you can then extrapolate to other ideas. And so that part has been it's been pretty joyful, I think, to back to the liking to feel like you're making progress. I think
Yeah.
the nice thing about these things is they do give you a sense of progress pretty easily and pretty quickly. And they also do build on past experiences, both in terms of muscle memory of how to use them, but also um, they create pathways for you to discover that maybe you could be approaching this work differently. And I think that's interesting as well.
Was it maybe 6 months ago or something we talked about how we were in the messy middle where jobs were being lost, but AI wasn't really very good and like it was just lots of lack of clarity. And I think at this point we're starting to see the possibilities form much better. Like, first of all, like what are the skills that you really are going to need going forward? What kinds of things you can do? The fact that you can build a business, on your own or with a few people. There's so many ways that the future can unfold in a positive way that's what I'm seeing versus, where I feel like 6 months ago, it was like this very doomsday, messy middle.
Yeah, and I also think that one of the things that this is teaching me, and I think is going to be an important part of this, is figuring out where the places to invest for the long term or even, the middle term. I don't know if any of us understand long term anymore, versus the things to invest to make it easy to change your mind and how to think about that. And to me, that's something that comes a little more naturally to me based on the fact that, we worked in systems for so long. But to me, that's an architecture problem. And I think this is the point we're going to have a great conversation with Ankur as well around this is a moment where having some understanding of architecture is going to be super beneficial because you're going to understand how to keep getting value even though pieces are going to have to be swapped in and out as things get better or as they become more stable in the overall ecosystem. So instead of waiting, I think figuring out how to get involved and participate, but still make sure that it's easy for you to adjust because what you're adding to is not just to your own velocity, but you're also adding to the way that you think about the problems and your understanding of the overall architecture. So I think it's a really useful skill. And I do think if you do not have architectural skill, get some friends, man, because there's some really amazing, smart tech people that are really doing a lot of the heavy lifting right now. And I do think that that is going to be adding benefit for all of us going forward.
You ready to invent the
Yeah,
future,
did we
Meg?
kill it? Is there any other thing about our AI awesomeness that we need to say?
I think we're making every day count, Meg.
Yes, and I am so excited. So let's invent the future together, everyone. I believe in us.
Let's make every day count.